Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in, everyone. As you're calling in, if you can please drop your name and where you're dialing in from in the chat. I have also activated closed captions for our call today. If you need help getting closed captions turned on your screen, here are the instructions. You can turn those on. Welcome in. How's everyone's August? Hi in Boston. Hi from LA, from Toronto, from Queens, from Philly. So good to see all of our incredible remakers here today. Seattle, San Francisco, London, Stockholm. Thanks for dialing in from your vacation in Stockholm. Arlington, Turkey, thank you for being with us. Thanks for dialing in for the first time today. Welcome. We're so excited to have you all. As many of you may know, we are 2 months into this summer's No New Clothes Challenge, and I would love to hear how No New Clothes is going for you all. I am going to drop a fun little poll so you can let us know how your No New Clothes Challenge is going. Are you struggling but sticking with it? Do you think you could take a whole nother year? I don't know. I personally think that I could go a whole nother year with my No New Clothes Challenge. Aisha, what about you? How is yours going this summer?
It's going great. Although when I was on vacation, it was a little tough, to get the right kinds of outfits. But I think I'm with you, Em. I could keep going.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving seeing from the chat. Almost 60% of you are saying that you think you could keep going for a year. Let's make that happen. I think we can do that together. Hi, everyone. We've got somebody saying they've been doing No New Clothes for 2 years. That's incredible. Hi from Brooklyn, from the UK, from San Francisco, from Detroit. Thank you so much for joining us. And congrats everyone who is taking part of No New Clothes with us this summer. If you haven't started your challenge yet, you can join at any time. We would love to have you. I'm going to go ahead and get our call started here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Aisha first and foremost, who has an update from the last community call when you were with us in July. And we were talking about some of the extreme heat facing our garment worker partners around the globe. So Aisha, I'm going to turn it over to you to give an update on that work.
Hi, everyone, and welcome, welcome. It's so good to see some first timers here. So, very warm remake welcome to our new community members. And as Emily mentioned, we, since the launch of the direct relief campaign here at Remake, have been very focused on listening to our garment worker partners and seeing what they need most. When the COVID pandemic hit, for example, a lot of our workers faced lockdown, where there was a lot of wage disruption. And at that time, our community had nimbly moved to ensure that we could provide necessities such as food and medicine to garment workers. Whenever there has been political upheaval and others, we've followed our garment worker partners' lead. And as some of you who were on last time's call know, at that point, a lot of our workers across South Asia were noting record heat, particularly in Pakistan. As you heard from some of that testimony, factories already hot, and with the summer months and those record temperatures, our workers were resorting to having to cut into their already meager wages for cold water, noting how dehydrating it was to get to factories. And so we've launched that direct relief fund, which continues to be ongoing. We hear from our worker partners just solidarity from you all, being able to share their stories, having a space in the community call, as well as through social media, to be able to really uplift the human-centered stories, because often the climate crisis tends to forget that, has been really important. And here to answer any questions, we continue to run the direct relief. We'll put that in the chat for you all. But what our worker partners are really needing right now in Pakistan are simple things, things like access to pedestal fans that can work when the power is cutting in and out, things like cold water in their long commutes. But our hope with this direct relief and the small things that we're able to do is really to use this as an advocacy tool to get companies to also pay attention. We're wanting manufacturers and brands, for example, to be supporting coolant systems. That's something we've heard from worker testimony, that a lot of factories don't have coolant systems. And we're going to keep the drumbeat of the need for climate adaptation funds in a bigger way with manufacturers, with brands, and governments as well. So here to answer any questions around the direct relief, but wanted to give you all a quick update that it's been an important way for us to show solidarity at a time where the world continues to record heat temperatures. So back to you, Emily.
Thank you, Aisha, for that update. And thank you to all the remakers who have supported the Direct Relief Fund for workers in Pakistan and who have tuned in to hear more about the work we're doing in the climate adaptation space. All of this is connected, both the climate work as well as the topic that we're going to be talking today, which is overproduction, of course. And we're happy to be able to have you here all under one Zoom roof to address those subjects. I'm going to go ahead and call up our panelists today who are joining us to talk about overproduction. Our world is awash in clothing. This is something that I know many of our community members know. More clothing than we could ever want or need, around 100 billion garments per year for only 8 billion people on this planet. We're here today to learn from various stakeholders within the fashion industry about the issues of overproduction and how they're impacting both people and planet, and how we begin to address some of these issues intersectionally. I'm going to first call up Alyssa. Alyssa is joining us very late at night from Cambodia. Thank you so much for being here, Alyssa. And she is working with underrepresented artists and communities who are affected directly by climate change in her role as the CEO and creator of Remade in Cambodia. Remade in Cambodia rescues clothes from rivers in Cambodia and then collaborates with young designers to turn them into beautiful works of art and fashion. It's a truly circular model. Alyssa, can you tell us more about the textile waste crisis in Cambodia, what you're seeing in the rivers, and the impact that textiles are having there?
Sure. Thank you so much, Emily, for the introduction, and for everyone today for coming. If you have any trouble hearing me, let me know. But yeah, so with this issue of the textile waste in Cambodia is an ongoing discovery process. The number that I'll share some numbers with you to start, but kind of the overwhelming sense that we've gotten is that it's everywhere. 20% of waste in the rivers and 60% of landfills are all filled with clothes. And for us in this community, it's a lot. It's a great proportion considering Cambodians are very resourceful and tend to upcycle things or to find use or a secondary market for them. And so the fact that that many clothes are in the landfills and rivers is quite astonishing. And then essentially that, like, a little bit about those clothes in the rivers, if you're wondering what it is that kind of the story that we were first told was that those clothes are coming from homes. When we asked, how they ended up there, people would say, or kind of the organizations that we were working with for collection would tell us that it was people leaving their own clothes out on the line and they would wash away. But really, we were getting such a large amount of clothes that felt like an incomplete story. And then when we started to literally line up the clothes on the floor and look at it, you would see 12, 10 copies of the same shirt. And at that point, it was quite apparent that the story went deeper. But currently, there's no research on this issue. So everything that we know is just from our experience with collecting the clothes and sorting it ourselves. But now what we've discovered is, you'll see 10 to 12 copies of the same shirt. You'll see 10 types of dresses in a few different forms that look like they came from the same factory, but the tag will say made in Thailand. So the story is quite complicated. And then another form of textile waste that we're seeing is secondhand clothes, coming most likely from all of the imports that Cambodia receives, but it'll come literally in a plastic bag and it'll be filled with like 50 sweaters. Cambodians don't have much use for sweaters, specifically within the context of those record heat waves. And so, those are the clothes that you're going to find in the river that the market sellers aren't able to use. So that's a little bit about the context of the waste issue we're facing here.
Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit more about the role that the garment industry, textile industry plays in Cambodia in general? It is a very large industry for the region.
Absolutely. Again, for kind of a number for context, is that over 1/3 of Cambodia's GDP does come from the garment industry, and it employs, I believe, over 750,000 women or people, and mostly women within that. And so it's, it's quite impactful in terms of providing employment. And we see that when, some of the factories are closing, either due to lack of demand during COVID, or due to some of their inabilities to meet like international standards, people are losing their jobs and they don't really have an alternative for that. And so, it's really important for Cambodia's GDP for people to have jobs, but at the same time, it's quite, I would say, like, colonial is the best word that I know how to use. They're taking advantage of people using cheap labor. The minimum wage is still about $200, but often ends up being less than that and people aren't necessarily paid on time, driving people to, have to take loans or into other really uncomfortable positions. And then they also are extracting their natural resources. One of the really big issues in Cambodia is that it's lost 1/3 of its forest. And a lot of that is, due or a portion of that is due to illegal logging that goes into fueling factories still. With, not really being accountable for what happened, or operator comes in and then they start. Can you hear?
Sorry, Alyssa, I think you froze. I know you were having some lagging internet issues, but thank you for that great introduction. And let's come back to you in a moment when you're able to address the internet, because we're fascinated to hear more about this. I'm going to bring up our next panelist. Yelena, thank you so much for joining us. You are a fashion industry veteran with over 20 years of experience working in sourcing and production. And many of the members of the Remake community listening today also work in and around the fashion industry. And we're very excited to get the opportunity to hear from you and understand more about the current fashion system. We understand a little bit about why overproduction happens, that in a way it is simply more profitable to overproduce and trash oversupply in the end than it is to reduce production to reasonable levels. But I'm wondering if you can share more from your experience. What are the real barriers around production and profitability that you want to share with the community today?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be part of this community and speaking to you guys today. Really excited to learn more about what Remake does and seeing how we can get involved, to be honest with you. I think that overproduction is something that is inevitable. What really ends up happening with overproduction is minimums, in my opinion. It's production minimums, it's color run minimums. We have gone so used to the factories, the fabric mills, the trim mills dictating what that minimums are going to be. And I think that where we've had the most success, or personally, I've had the most success, when you look at it, I head up intimate apparel. We have 32 components to make up a bra. And some of those components are tiny. They're so small. And the number of yardage that I might need is 30 yards of something. And the minimum from a mill is going to be 1,000 yards of something. So where I have found success is working with, first and foremost, my production factories, so tier 1 level factories, and saying to them, you know what, on, let's say, fashion colors, we're not going to make your 3,000 minimum. We're not going to make it and then have to end up donating it or losing it at a profit loss. Okay. Discuss with your factories, bringing those minimums down. Say we make more in replenishment colors and we make less on our fashion buys. At this moment, we're actually cutting fashion colors to only what we sell. So we take upfront orders, we know exactly what we sell to the stores, and we're discussing with those factories cutting to that level. Okay, so that's one place where I found success. Another place is really going to those fabric mills. Can it be a sample order instead of a production order? Discuss with your design mills. You know what? The color is not going to be as perfect, but we should be accepting this so we don't have more and overproduction of A goods, overproduction of B materials in our markets.
Thank you so much for sharing that real nugget of practical advice for many who are working inside this industry and not sure where to begin on addressing such a big topic. I see that, Alyssa, maybe you are back with us, so I'm going to return to you. You were sharing with us about the impact you're seeing in your community and the fashion industry and textile impacts in Cambodia.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emily. So sharing a little bit about the impact on the forest, that some of the factories are still using wood logs in order to fuel the factories. And, that accompanied with the chemicals that are going into the rivers, the fact that it's all largely under-researched, really affects, I would say, the environment here. And then also there's very little knowledge about it. So, and activism is nearly impossible here. And so it's really restricted and there's not a lot of access to this information. That's why we started as Remade in Cambodia, because we wanted to raise awareness within the community so that people could have the agency to, form a feeling about it. And so with that, and then the other aspect that we really deal with is the design and how we noticed that it's crazy that, Cambodia is producing so many clothes and you might see the phrase made in Cambodia, but you're not seeing designed in Cambodia. And you're not seeing really any of that local art shine. And part of it is that, brands come and they also set a standard for what it looks like. So everyone was really excited when some fast fashion brands opened up here. But then they're expected to meet this standard of wearing those clothes and following that fashion standard. And then that really drowns out local design as well. So what we're there for is to kind of, repair as much as we can and kind of just form a different fashion system and allow that to be a parallel that is more accessible to people and really promotes local arts at the center of it and, equity and everything.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us more about the people and designers you work with at Remade in Cambodia and some of the art that you've really been able to create from this textile waste?
Yeah, absolutely. I heard this phrase recently, but it's that, talent is never lacking, but it's just opportunity. And that could not be more true in Cambodia. I, have tried to I've watched 1,000, maybe more upcycling videos, but I've never seen some of the techniques that these designers are using to really, they'll use anything from like those cutoffs that are coming from the factory that are those small bits and they'll form them into a pair of shorts that, is the most beautiful collage. This year's clothes, not only were they upcycled with these clothes from the river, some of it being factory bits, but they were also inspired by the local wildlife that are affected by the issue of the waste in the rivers. And so these designers continue to push themselves and to really provide, a holistic look. The average age of our designer is about 21. The majority of them are still fashion students. There are a few fashion schools available in Cambodia, but I will say it's limited. But a lot of them are students or apprentices or still building their career here. So that's, they're really, the average age in Cambodia is 27. And so when we talk about like the next generation, it's like this is the generation that has to make change and that can still, in a lot of ways form, I think, the global community's impression of what's coming out of Cambodia. And that's really hopeful.
Thank you. Yelena, coming back to you, I'm curious, in your years working on these issues, have you seen the system changing? And in what ways, or what might be needed to move that needle?
So interestingly enough, I just returned from a pretty large with very top brands, sustainability and traceability conference last week. And I think that for the first time in attending these conferences through the years, and really since we've been talking about, the road to 2030 in the world of sustainability, I don't think that much has actually occurred until recently. In this past conference is where I heard real companies discussing real issues and what they're going to do in circularity. I think there's a lot of laws and legislations, regulatories, ERPs coming down the pipeline, and that's really going to force manufacturers and fashion companies to really change the way we do business. We're going to be accountable for overproduction. We're going to be accountable for reducing packaging. States, it's going to be state by state legislations that are going to be holding companies accountable, and they're going to have to change, the way they do business. Another practical, is working with dead stock. I've been encouraging my designers to work with dead stock, our own dead stock, as well as, Queen of Raw. There's a lot of companies out there, she happens to be one that I feel is amazing in that tech dead stock transformation. She works with companies, she works with mills, and, encouraging designers, to really see what's out there that you can reutilize, is an opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to bring our final panelists up to the stage today. Sana's joining us as the Sustainability Reporting Manager at Reformation, which is one of the brands participating in the Ellen MacArthur Fashion Remodel Project, which is a pilot project leading brands to identify solutions and unlock barriers in order to scale circular business models. We're really excited to hear more about that. And also to help guide these brands to begin to decouple revenue from production. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project and what made the team at Reformation excited to join in?
Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, it's nice to meet you all. So at Reformation, we're very thrilled to be a part of the Fashion Remodel Project. The project is really about pushing boundaries of what's possible in sustainable fashion. We're currently working with 7 other brands, including Arc'teryx, Primark, Zalando, and some of the H&M Group brands. The way the project is set up is that each of us has established a baseline percentage of revenue from circular business models. So how much of your revenue is being generated by those circular business models. And our baseline is based on 2023, and we've all set a target for 2027, essentially, and we'll be reporting progress to the foundation annually. The aim of the project is to really demonstrate the viability of circular business models in fashion and creating a more resilient industry with diverse income versus a focus on new production, essentially. Obviously, circular business models aren't new, whether it's renting formal wear, selling vintage garments, offering repair services. They've all been around for decades, but they're not really a focus, I would say, for most fashion companies. At Reformation, we've embraced circular practices such as resale, rental, and remaking for a while. And we've recently added repair as well. But the reason we've joined this project is to really learn how to scale these efforts as rapidly as our main business. We really want circular business models to become an integral part of our business. And we really believe in decoupling revenue from production. And we really think that's crucial to have a more circular fashion industry. So yeah, we're very eager to uncover new ways, hopefully, to achieve this.
And we're excited to hear more about the project. In the Remake Fashion Accountability Report, we outlined for the industry a couple of key metrics that we think brands can institutionalize as they aim to do just that, take an approach to overproduction and waste. I'm curious, I would open this up to any of our panelists here. What key metrics do you think brands can be looking at as they're trying to think about how to make a meaningful impact on overproduction and waste?
I can start by saying how Reformation tries to tackle it, right? There's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but the way our business is set up is that we make a lot of different styles, but we make very, very small quantities to kind of test the market. And so a style goes live, we see how well it does, and based on that, only based on those numbers, we will then place a bigger order, if at all. So we really try to test the market by testing out a style in limited quantities always. But yeah, that's just one of the ways.
Yelena, do you have any thoughts on key metrics that brands could be looking at?
Yeah, I think, I think that for us, we're just kind of starting to investigate what those key metrics can be. We're in sleepwear and underwear, very an intimate product. How can you make circularity work in a in not in a product category that is so, hence the word intimate to a person. So I think really working, and it's different, we're a brand that we're multiple brands that go to multiple stores. So really working with our retailers is first and foremost, working with our retailers on what those right minimums are that actually sell through. So we're not paying for markdowns. They're not paying for lower margins. They're not trying to get rid of things and then selling them off or trying to donate them. Really working with each of our retailers to find that right balance of what the actual quantity should be that the consumers need and want for a sell-through. And I think that that's really comes down to planning, having really good systems in place that can plan out production, plan out colorways, and working with those retailers. So I think we're all kind of like, Sana said, it's not a one size fits all, and it's very different, direct to consumer versus, companies that go to manufacturing for other retailers. We're kind of relying on other people.
I
Thank
think, or if
Go
I can
ahead,
jump in,
Alyssa.
just
Yeah.
yeah, I would say even before we get to metrics, I think it's really important to understand or to trace where the clothes have been going in reality. Because at least how it's worked here in Cambodia is that, the information about the logging has come out in a report. Nobody knows about the clothes in the river still. We talk about, so like that's already something that people don't know about, that percentage. So if we can see that percentage of textiles found in the river reduce, that would be amazing. But that requires, manufacturers, brands to even have an understanding of that issue. One of the other routes for textile waste in Cambodia that's come out recently just through reporting is also that they've ended up in kilns for where people are burning them more informally for energy. And that has also been affecting healthcare workers on multiple front, or has been affecting the health of workers on multiple fronts. And people only, again, the brands only start to respond in after the report came out, and that's really big brands, like Nike or others. And so I think just having for brands to take a step back and like really look at where their waste is actually going, and then we can, create more effective like metrics from there.
Thank
I
you.
think that's a really great point. I don't think that, enough manufacturers even know what the concerns are to know where they're going. I think that everybody believes, or I want to believe that everybody's trying to do the right thing. We have our compliances in place. You have your, regulations. We follow everything. And I think knowing that complete circularity or knowing the issues within a country, listening here in Cambodia, it's very concerning what's going on as more and more Cambodia is only increasing in production, as a lot of companies are starting to move away from China. Where are they moving to? It's places like Cambodia and Vietnam. Indonesia are going to be in the forefront, and those issues are just going to be moving along. So really setting those matrix now is going to be so important as production increases in these countries.
Thank you. Sana, I'm really interested to learn more about what you have seen in sort of the early days of this project with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Any early learnings on reducing reliance from new production?
So for us, thinking about it really, really practically, a significant early insight has been the importance of partnerships and localization. For each of our circular business model offerings, we currently collaborate with expert organizations. So for example, we work with Rent the Runway for rental, or ThreadUp for resale, Hamster for repairs. I think, yeah, partnering with organizations rather than trying to implement everything internally has proven for us to be very effective. For us, it's really important to expand these circular solutions internationally, so that all of our customers can keep their clothes in the loop. So currently, unfortunately, our services are only available to US customers, but we've learned that instead of trying to find this global provider, it's better to really establish those localized partnerships. So especially for services like repair, for example, it's essential to employ local experts and avoid transporting, all these garments to a central hub to have it repaired at your factory or your distribution center. So in essence, our main takeaway has really been the value of learning and collaborating with others and trying to establish these local systems.
Yes, partnerships are going to be so key to this pursuit as well. One more question for you before I open it up to the wonderful questions that have been coming in the chat. Please continue to drop those. What do you see being the opportunities? Maybe you've started to think about some of the challenges to circularity, but that has also opened up the door to places where Reformation can go deeper.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest barriers, which is also related to the metrics you just mentioned, but at least for this project specifically, is trying to make the economics work. I think it's like a widespread challenge for sustainability initiatives, whether it's metrics or the financial side of it. It's always tricky, especially when you're trying to generate revenue whilst reducing production. However, I think the fashion industry, thrives on reinvention. So we have the power to shape trends and culture. And so I think really leveraging this innovation and creative side of the industry has really has a lot of potential. But to give a more concrete example, again, it'll be repair. But when you provide a complimentary repair service, it's very often seen as a cost, but it's actually an incredible touch point with your customer to build loyalty and retention. And so I think an important thing to keep in mind is that rather than analyzing circular business models with linear metrics, we need to recognize that the revenue streams that come from circular business models are actually more nuanced. And so they might not always involve a direct transaction, which a lot of people in businesses are looking for, but they foster customer relationships, they extend the product life cycle, so they reduce waste, they encourage customers to keep clothes for longer. So I think it's really important, to foster those relationships as well in that way. In terms of opportunities, I think it's still, as I said, for us, a real focus is making sure that every one of our customers can access our circular business models to make sure that that becomes an integral part of our business and hopefully becomes as big as our linear business model. But yeah, a lot of financial challenges, but I think the innovation in the fashion industry will hopefully get us there. And we're very excited to see the learnings and share it out into a report that hopefully can help other businesses grow their circular business models.
We're excited to hear more about the learnings too. I love that you mentioned that repairs are a touch point to build a longer term connection with a customer. One of our community members actually dropped in the chat. I love that you do alterations. All of these little things encourage and inspire customers to value their clothes more. I'd love to open it up to our panelists to hear more about how you think the industry could encourage people to actually want to value and keep our clothing longer. Where can we go with that progress point?
Go ahead, Lola.
This is kind of just a rolling off point of both what Sonny was talking about as well, which is one of the things like kind of our central challenge that Remade in Cambodia is doing is how to upscale upcycling. And how to do it in a way that values, those designers and that specific artistry and like really focusing on the craftsmanship. At the same time, with each piece that they create, that goes into it, you know, it's a talking point when somebody, like each person that, you know, that purchased one of these outfits can say like, these clothes are from the river, but what does that mean? And that kind of stems into then people thinking about why would clothes be in the river. And so we kind of, that's how we go about it at this point. And we're, you know, working on scaling up and creating products because we, at the end of the day, like the grants only last for so long. And we've been so, you know, grateful at some of the encouragement that I find is that the international kind of interest and cooperation in this. You know, we work with companies from Germany, we work with GIZ, the German development arm, but we also, you know, get grants from the US. We work with other countries. So that kind of international interest in this issue has been really encouraging. But just going back to the perspective of the consumer is, we think, you know, with each piece that you know, you take time to buy or that you take time to learn about, or even just with a simple phrase, we can get people thinking about the other clothes in their closet and where they come from and who's making them and where their waste might end up after, you know, they're done with their piece of clothes. So that's just kind of our approach from now, working within the system of buying clothes, but getting people to slow down a little bit.
And I think just to add, you know, with product passport, you know, in the talks right now, I think, you know, as garments begin to have, you know, what I want to say is a story, you know, a QR code that you can scan and know the factory. And as we get deeper into sustainable fabrics, which I really believe the industry's moving to, you know, really using BC Icon, really using Burla, using polyester that I just heard of that's decomposing, that can decompose within 6 months, and having your garment be able to tell the consumers the story of it, you know, where the factory is or anything about the factory, I think will actually make people value their products more no matter how much they spend on them. I think right now is like this value of higher end products or products that you buy for a special occasion. But I think that if day-to-day products that we buy have that story attached to it, consumers are going to get more attached to the product. And I think that's the way, knowing like that this fabric is sustainable or this lycra came from corn, oh, what does it do? Make people more interested in finding out about fabrics and garments.
You, Sandra, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I think we offered the repair service initially, and the alteration really came to try to extend the product life cycle to make sure that maybe they can add something. But yeah, I think it's every brand still trying to figure out what makes customers tick, right? What will make sure that they will wear them for the longest amount of time, and or value them so much that they would rather pass them to another person versus discarding it. We always encourage trying to resell or rent it out or give it to someone versus recycling, because then you yet again use energy, and it's definitely not the most sustainable solution. But yeah, always trying to we're still trying to figure out how to make sure customers keep their garments for the longest amount of time.
One of our community members drops, emotional durability is often as important as physical durability. That we are causing a shift in mindset as well as we're talking about the actual clothes that we make. We've got a comment from the Q&A. One of the challenges I think we've all heard of is that brands don't really even know how many total apparel or accessory items they're producing in a given year. Is there a way for brands to give a sense of those numbers and what's happening with those apparel items? This person writes, I think that would be a good start. Wondered to open that up to the panelists to see if you have any thoughts.
I mean, I could just jump in. I think from a brand perspective, we definitely know exactly how many garments we produce to the number. I mean, to the one. There's no, we have systems in place to know exactly what we produce, to know what's, overproduced or hopefully not. I think that is, companies definitely need to know that. I think where we might not know is at the factory level, the back end, how many garments, were quality rejected, and how many didn't make the cut for TOP samples, how many didn't make PP. And I think that maybe understanding that back end of sampling, that gets left at the factory is a good way to start, besides just knowing what you're actually importing.
Yeah, echoing what Yelena said, we definitely also know exactly how many garments we're producing. I think so. Besides the more obvious product passports or things where you have QR codes and you can track the clothes for longer, which hopefully will be the norm in the future. The way we're trying to stay closer to what the customers do with our garments is by having those circular business models and extending our relationship with the clothes. So offering the repair when there is a hole or they want to refresh their garment. And by working with partners, for example, for resale, you can also see how many products are being fluctuated. And so we're trying to kind of gauge, right, by scouring the net, how many of our customers are recycling our garments or reselling. But as of right now, that's the only way we can get that data, because we don't really know what the customer does at post-purchase, if I'm honest.
I see a lot of shout outs to the OR Foundation. I want to shout them out too. We worked on a report this year where the OR Foundation had researchers in, I think, 11, 12 different countries, and they were looking at accountability for not only secondhand textiles that are being imported, but also some of those factory seconds and the markets that they're ending up in. And they had local researchers researching in those different countries. So just to look at, and that was more EPR, like a EPR focused. But then they were also gaining a lot of valuable information about some of those trends. And then one other aspect is probably like one of the best moments I think I've witnessed in this field is when we were at the Global Fashion Summit last year. One of our designers spoke, and we were at the OR Foundation's talk, and they passed out the clothes that they had collected from the beaches in Ghana. And, so many brands that had either, like been on stage and spoke about, their responsibility and their traceability, or had, not even acknowledged their textile waste that they produce while talking about sustainability. Like we're on the name, like we're on those clothes. And that's the same experience that we had. And that's something that we want to model off the OR Foundation, is start to look at the brands that are coming in. Not all the time is there a tag, so it's not always easily identifiable. But really just, I think, bridging that disconnect and just going back to what I said earlier, which is really having a full idea or conducting the research and fully understanding the extent of the issue is like a perfect way to start. And then looking at, okay, where are those garments ending up, just as a first start.
Thank you. Yes, in the comments, we have community members shouting out a campaign that the OR Foundation is building around getting brands to disclose the number of products they produce annually, if they are already aware of those production numbers, or around doing the key metric research to discover those numbers. Another question from the chat: what would it take to get more companies to disclose production volumes so that they can be accountable to their own overproduction goals? I'd love to open that up to the group.
I can start, but I can obviously only talk for Reformation. I think that we share a lot of metrics in terms of like how many of our garments are discarded, or how many units we recirculate amongst circular business models. But I think what's a little bit tricky in terms of sharing production volumes, for example, we are a privately held company, and so sharing those types of financial metrics, unfortunately, is really hard with shareholders, and it's not that easy. But something else that we have been looking at to kind of still try to make up for that accountability is starting at the design process, to design for disassembly and for recycling. So making sure that when the customer is done, it can be easily disassembled or turned into a new product and recycled. So that has been one of our starting points, to really make sure that our products cannot only be like, we don't want it downcycled, we want to make sure that it can be fiber to fiber recycled. So that's been our primary focus, which I know is not the ultimate solution, but that's what we've started.
I mean, I think that there's regulations like ERP coming down the pipeline that are going to make companies disclose, their volumes and exactly how much they're producing and exactly, the policies are, in the works. And I think that they are going to be pushed through eventually, and companies are going to be accountable.
On a last note, I think activism is so important. I mean, we kind of see, what happens when activism isn't possible in our community. And so it's hard for people to care, like to know about the issue or to care about the issue. But then in some of our surrounding countries, like Indonesia, for example, there's a lot more activism and there's a lot more awareness of goals and a lot more youth are engaged in the issues. And you see then that like reflected in the media. I mean, unfortunately, what's happening, in Bangladesh, but you have like with some of the activism, not to say that it's safe, but when you have people speaking up and raising awareness, it becomes a global interest and it becomes like people are able to care like about the issue internationally. I think activism is just so important. And then that follow up and reporting and creating awareness worldwide. So much of what Remake does, I think, is so critical to then getting those things like EPR like pushed through.
Thank you. And I think it's so wonderful that we're all able to come together as thoughtful people, brands, businesses, and advocate for those systems level changes that we believe will help to level the playing field. We are all up against this world of ultra fast fashion that we want to see change happen. And so I think today's call is a great example of some ways that we can all take learnings back into our own places of work and spheres of influence and make a difference. If everyone can give a warm remake welcome to our warm remake thank you to our panelists for being with us today. Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and call up my colleague Becca, who is here today to share some advocacy updates with our community. Thank you again to our panelists, and I'll turn it over to you, Becca.
Thank you, Em, and thank you, everyone. I guess on the topic of activism, I'd love to give a couple of updates on some of the campaigns that we've been working on. But just to say thank you to our panelists as well. I'm super excited to see how this conversation evolves and how we can scale the reduction of overconsumption. Okay, so in July, Remake hosted a Make Amazon Pay teach-in where we heard from Owen Espley, Uni Global Unions coordinator for the Global Make Amazon Pay Coalition, and Davina Bakshi, a humanitarian health researcher and journalist who interviewed Amazon warehouse workers in India for an incredible article on the Remake website, which I think Emily will drop in the chat. Owen and Davina spoke to us about the unprecedented heat in which Amazon workers in India and around the world are being forced to work through without adequate workplace adjustments and provisions provided by the company to protect its supply chain employees. And on this call, we launched an email action campaign to remind Amazon that they have a responsibility to safeguard the health and well-being of all of the company's employees around the world. And calling on the company to meet the demands of its vulnerable workers who are asking Amazon to uphold its own supply chain standards and safeguard the welfare of all of the company's supply chain employees who are being forced to work in this record heat without the necessary workplace safeguards and adaptations. Also calling on Amazon to sign the International Accord for Health and Safety in the textile and garment industry and to commit to incorporating climate adaptation measures in all mitigation and just transition plans to ensure safe, climate resilient jobs of dignity for workers throughout the supply chain. So thank you to everyone that attended that teach-in and to everyone who has participated in the action so far. To date, over 1,500 Remake community members have taken action on social and via email. And if you've not yet taken our email action, we'll drop the link in the chat. If you have engaged in this email action already and feel inclined to do so again, I would encourage you to do so, as we've updated one of the demands to reflect a broader set of demands for the company being asked by its unions globally beyond India, which was the initial ask. And then I would love to tee up another case that we're working on and a campaign that we're an upcoming campaign. So you all showed up for Amazon workers, and now we're calling on this amazing community to show solidarity with Cambodian leatherware workers in a union busting case we've been working on. In June, the Worker Friendship Union Federation asked for Remake's intervention after several of its members at Ventura Leatherware were illegally terminated from their positions earlier in the year. These terminations are an example of factory retaliation against workers for exercising their freedom of association. Ventura has also engaged in other union busting and intimidation tactics, such as threatening employees, filing legal complaints against union leaders, monitoring the activity of workers who engage with the union, and detaining workers for advocating for their fundamental rights. These acts are not only in violation of Cambodian law and international labor standards, but also brand supplier codes of conduct. We will need your help tagging the implicated brands, including Coach, Fossil, Michael Kors, and Tory Burch on Instagram, to let them know they have a joint responsibility with their factories to uphold their codes of conduct. At the end of the day, these companies have the power and influence to remediate labor violations and to ensure their factories are respecting workers' rights. So please keep an eye out on our Instagram and set those profile notifications so that you can take action on this campaign when it drops in the coming days. And we also invite you to learn more by joining our next teach-in, which will be on union busting and will take place on August 15th. During the webinar, we'll dive into concepts like collective bargaining and freedom of association, why they're so essential to worker power, the role brands play in advocating for these rights, and how you can help bring garment worker voices to the table to stop union busting in its tracks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becca. Our community has been so active this month. You are all incredible. Thank you for all you've done to show up for garment workers in Pakistan facing extreme heat, for workers in Amazon warehouses in India. I will follow up in the Remake Ambassador Slack after the call today with that short email link if you haven't taken the chance to do that, so that you can participate in that campaign. And as Becca said, please do keep your notifications for Slack and social media turned on as we are gearing up to go live with this union busting case we have been working on in Cambodia, and workers there could also really use your support. Thank you all for all you do. I'm going to turn it over now to my teammate Holly, who's here to share more updates from our incredible ambassador community this month.
Hey everyone, thanks Em. Happy August. Before we hop into this month's virtual programming updates, I want to celebrate some standout ambassadors. If you have an ambassador in your community that you would like to see featured, nominate them with the form that Emily is dropping in the chat now. And now presenting this month's Ambassador Superstars. The South Asia Hub is highlighted here for the impact of their hard work and passion in educating their community and growing our movement in making the fashion industry a better place. Seeing these leaders rise from moderating programs with Eco-Threads workshops to this month traveling to support our worker partners in Gurgaon, India, I'm honored to share their dedication with our community at large today. Next, Emily Pink is an ambassador from our UK hub who is always amplifying Remake's work on her college campus, uplifting the No New Clothes Challenge, and interviewing fellow Remake ambassadors for her blog, The Little Wardrobe, where you can find her recent interview with Lexi Silverstein, one of our ambassadors in the LA hub. Emily, you are such a powerhouse, and shout out for attending the Students Organizing Sustainability Conference in the UK. Also hailing from the UK is Bryce Goodall. Bryce, from your engagement in our virtual educational programming to your passion for making positive change in the human rights movement, you are truly a model Remake ambassador. Seeing your dedication for making the world a better place is so inspiring, and it is contagious. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you so much. Last but not least, Cece and Erin, our Canada community organizers. We could go on about how much we appreciate the energy and time these two have given our movement. The Remake team is still so blown away by the recent action you both supported with the Lululemon Dressed in Oil campaign alongside Stand Earth and Oxfam. Also, Cece is one of our newest community organizers, and she's here on the call today, so send her a little hello and a nice welcome. Next up, we have some great educational events this month. On August 15th, like Becca was just mentioning, we're hosting a What is Union Busting teach-in. Brands like REI and Amazon are known to have used scare tactics and unfair dismissal to keep labor costs low and keep workers from exercising their rights. In this program, we'll learn why it's so important for the fashion industry to prevent union busting in its supply chain and how you can support garment workers today. This is a great intro program, whether you are new to this work and looking to get involved, or you've been around for some time and want to refresh. On August 22nd, join us to learn the importance of mending with Rebecca Harrison, founder and lead sewist at Old Flame Mending, a personal favorite of mine. I'm very excited for this one. Throughout the program, we're going to learn about Rebecca and about the 10,000 plus pieces that she has saved. We'll have a live mending session combined with a Q&A. So be sure to bring your DIY projects to this one so we could work together. On August 30th, join us with the Asia Floor Wage Alliance and the Garment and Allied Workers Union to hear from affected workers and union leaders protesting labor violations and unjust terminations at Chelsea Mills in Urgaon, India. This webinar will address the importance of collective action in addressing gender-based violence and union busting. And you can share, and we're going to share how you can use your voice to protect the rights of garment workers. For Remake ambassadors out there, you can find more information on these programs and many more virtual and in-person events on the Ambassador Hub, including thrift crawls, the Remake Yoga Club, ambassador meetups, and so much more. If you are not a Remake ambassador yet, you can learn more about our global Changemaker program and how you can get involved in growing this movement on our website or by clicking the link dropped in the chat. I hope to see you all again this month, and I'm going to pass it to Emily to close this out.
Thank you, Holly, and congratulations to all of our Remake superstars and campaigners. It's been so incredible to see you put your change-making power into action this month, and I can't wait to lock arms with you to do even more. I've just dropped a little poll in the chat if you would like to share something that you learned on today's call. Today's call was very interesting. I previously had heard of textile waste issues in countries in the global south, such as Ghana or Chile, but I wasn't aware that this was a circumstance that was facing Cambodia in the same way, and I really appreciate getting to learn more about that on the call. I'm really curious what others learned about on today's call too. I'm cheering you on in your No New Clothes challenge, whether you're in your final month or you are gearing up to take it on for the rest of the year. We'll be excited to have you all. And thank you to our panelists for giving their time today, their thoughtful perspectives. Thank you to the community for your thoughtful questions. And we look forward to the month ahead. Remake ambassadors, we'll see you over on the Slack community and speak more soon. Take care all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, hi.